Hello guys and gamers, and welcome back to another video. Before we begin, I would love to remind you that if you like this video or any other videos on my channel, please like and subscribe. This is a very small channel, so it actually really means a lot to me if I just get like 1 or 2 subscribers per video, because we are also getting very close to 300, and we'll be very close to 300 for quite a while now. So if you like my videos, please consider subscribing. Why do I keep doing this? I don't know, but I'm using the other hand now. So let's get right into the actual video. Ow. Pokemon used to be just fine with graphics, but I think that changed when we got into the 3D era with Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, and ever since we've had loads and loads more discussion on the graphics and also performance of Pokemon games. But are the graphics actually that bad? Well, let's discuss about this. And of course, I am someone who has worked in the game industry, so I want to take a further dive into this topic and not just say this tree looks bad, so the game bad. So let's start off this discussion by talking about the art direction. So, talking about the art direction, for the beginning, let's do a little fun experiment, okay? If you close your eyes and think about the vast world of Pokemon, how do you see it? You can open your eyes now. And if you are thinking about something very colorful and cartoony, then yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people have been watching the anime, and whenever there's any marketing material or anything, posters made out of Pokemon, it is always in a cartoony, vibrant world. But despite this, the games, at least the mainline games, have been going in a weird photorealistic direction. And I don't really blame them, because that has been kind of the standard for JRPGs. There are many JRPGs that have this semi-photorealistic plus also cartoony characters type of art direction. So yeah, I don't blame them for going this direction, and in itself it's fine. But at the same time, there is some conflict with the Pokemon characters themselves looking very cartoonish, while the environments look photorealistic, and Game Freak is not the best in making the environments look good. I will come back to that a bit later. But it does create a bit of a mishmash. And I also feel like if they would have gone with the more cartoony look, which they did start with the first game on the Switch, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, that was great, and I still think that's one of the better looking mainline entries in the Switch era. And if they had kept that for, say, Sword and Shield, I think that could have helped Pokemon a lot when it comes to making open worlds, because, well, cartoony graphics and cel-shaded stuff usually is less demanding than fully textured open areas that you're trying to do. Okay, so next up, textures. And let's talk about them, because I feel like a lot of people give Pokemon Sword and Shield a lot of crap for having bad textures, and in some cases it does, yes, that is very true, but it's not like Pokemon games that came before it were the prettiest things ever. Here's a few examples. So yeah, looking at the textures, I feel like some of the earlier 3D Pokemon games get a pass on how good it looks, but to be fair, I think some of them do look ugly. Here is a screenshot from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and just looking at like the water textures here, it doesn't look that great. It's okay, but the problem here is that it repeats too much, and you know, the current here doesn't look natural at all. It looks like just someone brushed it over or did something. It's a bit blurry, it's weird. All of the textures on the rocks look the same, and I will talk more about the rocks in a second. But I think mainly the problem is here is trying to make 3D world look good based on based on the original games that were just a 2D map based, tile based game. So it doesn't look good, but there are some areas where it just doesn't look great. And I think water is one. And then another one is the water here looks fine, by the way. So just the grass. But the problem here, for me at least, is the rock textures or the cliff textures, which again repeat a bit too often. There needs to be a bit more displacement there. For modern games, I think it looks a lot better. There are certainly issues with the environment, and there's just some like inconsistency on how good some textures are. Because I would say that the textures on the Pokemon themselves are brilliant. You can see Scyther, Scizor, and Cleaver here, both showcasing something. Scyther is a bit more bug-like. Scizor is of course very metallic and shines accordingly, and Cleaver has like a nice rock texture on the axe itself. But then when you look at the environment, you go look at the ground, the grass here, and it doesn't look that great anymore. One of the things I like least here is just how blurry the grass texture is supposed to be, and there's weird patches of standalone grass here that serve no purpose and they just kind of look bad. And here you have like another example, this time from Sword and Shield, where you can just see like the Pokemon themselves look good, but when you look at the environment, it's like significantly worse in quality. And it's just like weird comparing those two. Like you can see both of them at the same time, but the Pokemon themselves just look so much better than the environment. So it's a bit weird. And finally, let's go into the lighting. Okay, yes, for the shadows and the lighting in general, it feels a bit weird, in my opinion. There's like a really weird glow for certain things in the overworld, but at the same time, the shadows are quite harsh. You can see the shadows being quite harsh in just like the trees over here, where the shadows are basically all black, which makes it look weird. But then some things like the Pokemon Center and the ground here looks very glowy. Let's see if I can find a better picture here. Like, yeah, the trainer shirt looks like it's glowing almost a bit, but the rest of it, and like you can see the trees have the weird shadow here as well. It doesn't look good. And also one thing is that I just feel like the shadows don't feel naturally cast. Like if you look at the shadow of this lad over here, looks like he doesn't have legs or hands or a hat on. And it just looks like a weird pixelated mess. I don't know if they did some like coding trickery to make the shadow worse in quality to just make the performance a bit better, or if they try to cast like a different 2D image of the character model onto the ground. I'm not sure what they do with their game engine, what game engine they use, or whatever, how they make games. Again, I'm not a technical artist, but it's just makes it look weird. Then sometimes the Pokemon also get like really weird bad lighting. I don't know if there's like a texture on the Pokemon that makes it do so, if it's not reflecting light as it should. But like here you can see like the Dugong starts looking like awfully dark here. And there are moments where it should, but compared to the seal over here, it's clearly not as dark. So I'm not really sure what they're doing with the lighting on the shadows, but it's just not working for them. It just looks odd. So yeah, in summary, why are they so bad? Why are the graphics not the best? And there are many explanations for this. For example, Game Freak does have a pretty tight schedule when it comes to the game, so they don't have as much time to polish up the graphics. That's one thing. Another thing is that they've been wanting to do a open world game, and ever since 10 years ago they were still doing like pixel art with stuff like Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, then moving on to 3D, A New Frontier, and then 5 years later first HD games and then open world games. So they've been rising quite quickly without growing much in the amount of employees or experience in those fields. They're still a bit lacking when it comes to 3D in terms of like making it run well and the performance. So yeah, and they don't have the best technologies to make massive 3D open worlds. 3D open worlds themselves are like much more demanding than your traditional routes that you used to see in Pokemon. So that also explains like the performance issues. They're just much harder to make work, and that's why if you go into a game like Pokemon Sword and Shield, the regular routes, they look fine, but when you go into the wild areas, that's where all of the screenshots from the bad textures come from. But it's not like Game Freak has been that successful with 3D before. Like I said, in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, there were like way more loading zones than there were in the original games. There were some patches of land that you could have only 5 steps on, and then it went to loading zones between routes that didn't exist were in that game. And also, let's not forget about triple battles, which were a big thing in Generation 5, were also included in Generation 6, but due to performance issues and maybe cutting on time, they were not included at all in Pokemon Sun and Moon and forwards. So yeah, Pokemon has had trouble with 3D environments a bit before, and just 3D gameplay before as well. So it's not like this is the first time they've struggled a bit, but I think the biggest reason here is that we've had bad performance more than usual, and also the games feel a bit more rushed, and they have not been as polished as something like Black 2 and White 2 were. So we look for reasons to not like this game. And one of them that you can easily see if you don't know like game design and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff, like why am I not having fun, you can just look at like graphics are easy to look at, like this does not look good. And why am I saying this is because I notice it too. And for me, that is saying quite a bit. I'm not usually the graphics guy. I don't really care, because there's plenty of games that I just absolutely love. Like, for example, Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's a good game, really, really good. But there are definitely times where it looks really bad. But first time playing through it, I didn't even notice. But with Pokemon games, I do, because there are other faults with the franchise nowadays, other than just the graphics bad. And I wish the graphics were better, and I wish the performance was much, much better. But the games just are less polished nowadays, so these things are kind of weaponized in a way. So, final part of this is, how do we solve this? Well, we, not so much. It's mostly about how could Game Freak solve this. And it's just basically like, ask help from other companies. Maybe Monolith Soft, they would be happy to help maybe. They just work on every other Nintendo game anyway, so, maybe get some of them to help you out with the environment design. they do a really good job. I mean, Xenoblade games, they look pretty good. Yeah, they're not fantastic, but they look pretty good, and the open worlds are quite alright in those games. Much better than in Pokemon. Or just, if you can't get more help from other companies, which could also be like contracting a little bit weird sometimes, you can just hire more people, expand, try to expand a bit, try to focus on like technical artists and environmental artists, because that's what most people see when it comes to the graphics, I feel. A lot of people would just say, hey, you've been having so many games coming out the past few years, where maybe you should expand the time that you have to make games. And that can work, but the other option is just have a smaller scope. A lot of people enjoyed Pokemon Legends Arceus because it was a bit of a smaller game. It was a smaller project, but a lot of people loved it. And it was clear that a lot of like quality of life issues and a lot of new fresh mechanics were brought onto the game because it was a smaller thing, so they had more time to make that small package a really good small package instead of a big package that kind of falls apart at some points. Of course, none of this could happen. It would just take a while for Game Freak to get used to things, and hey, hopefully they will get some boost from Nintendo's next console as well, so that could be something great. But we don't know. But what do you think about this topic? Please let me know in the comments below, and if you really like my videos, subscribe, and most importantly, watch some other videos of mine, because that's what the YouTube algorithm apparently wants. So you will soon see the outro screen with a few recommendations. Feel free to click on some of those, or maybe some videos on the sidebar if I am recommended. But yeah, I have nothing else to say here, so I will see you guys next time.